Listen to this podcast now
on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Leadership Thread with Dr. Peggy Polonis.
I'm Dr. Peggy Polonis. Join me on each episode where I unravel the story that shaped leaders, tracing the thread that led them where they are today. Because leadership isn't born in adulthood. And thank you once again for joining us on the Leadership Thread, education, ethics, and sustainability.
Download all of Red Apple Media's podcasts right now through your favorite podcast platform.
Listen, all you New Yorkers. Taxi. Okay, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
Welcome back. Joining me now, I hope, is Senator Bob Torricelli. Bob Torricelli is widely respected among folks in politics at the professional level because prior to his election to the House and the Senate, he was a top aide to Vice President Walter Mondale, and he's a shrewd political analyst beyond just his service in the Senate. In the Senate, he was on the Finance Committee, the Government Affairs Committee, the Foreign Relations Committee, the Judiciary Committee, and the Rules Committee. He's one of the smartest guys I know. And interestingly enough, every time we've had him here on the Stone Zone, we have achieved the highest ratings the show has ever had. So we are honored to have Senator Bob Torricelli with us.
Roger, thanks for having me, and a very happy Easter to you.
Same to you. I don't know if you were listening. I just gave my grandmother's, probably my aunt's, recipe for pizza gain, the traditional Italian-American Easter pie. And I hope you...
I remember a lot of very happy Sicilian Easters. Easter is large in many Christian cultures, but in southern Italy it is a particularly important holiday and attaches its own food and festivities with it.
I think it's fair for me to say that Senator Torricelli was not unique, but somewhat different as a Democrat. He was always a hardline anti-communist, particularly in this hemisphere. Really the father of the legislation that created the very effective Cuban embargo, an outspoken critic of the brutal Castro regime, as well as the regime in Venezuela and elsewhere in this hemisphere, and passed some of the most important legislation in that area. We could talk about this hemisphere for a whole show, but he has particular expertise and relationships in Iran, and introduced me some months ago to members of the resistance. These are very, very brave people. The mass slaughter of dissidents, the mass slaughter of anyone who speaks out against the regime is these people are butchers. I think between 38 and 40,000 of their own citizens publicly executed in some cases in the recent weeks. And I agreed with his analysis on this show not too long ago, where I thought that with targeted attacks on the Iranian Republican Guard would weaken them and embolden some in the army and the police to revolt. That actually does seem to be happening with the fall of some of the major cities. We could have just continued to attack on the infrastructure, cultural sites, and schools. I think is probably being used from a PR point of view to try to rally people to the butchers as opposed to against them. However, neither Senator Torricelli and I are privy to what the president knows about their capability to develop a nuclear weapon. They bragged at the negotiating table that they had enough enriched uranium to make at least 7, perhaps as many as 11 nuclear devices. I happen to know folks in the military who tell me that they believe that is true. And the president has now done what he has done. But I guess my first question, Senator, is how degraded is their capability? The president, who I believe says we've destroyed their Navy, we've destroyed their Army, yet just last week they managed to fire a missile at Turkey. And they continue to use drones very effectively. So how degraded do you think their strength is?
Well, first, Roger, I don't think there's any question that they were fairly close to a nuclear weapon. It was just a matter of time. They really just had to make the decision to go to final construction of the weapon. They had 60-70%, depending who you listen to, degree purified fuel that is far in excess of anything that would be used in a hospital or university or research laboratory. It only had one purpose, a nuclear weapon. The problem, of course, is you can't uninvent something. And while the Israelis have killed many of their nuclear scientists, this is not Libya. This is a country of 92 million people, well-educated professional classes, top universities. They have the ability to make a nuclear weapon. So we have set them back, but there's no such thing as permanent. If we're going to deny them having a nuclear weapon, not this year or next year, because that capability has been lost. I don't say that lightly. It's an extraordinary achievement by the United States. Having denied them a nuclear weapon, they'll be back in 5 or 10 years unless there's a regime change. That's why having this government fall, we can debate how to do it, is so important. On degradation, it's also not insignificant that we are destroying the factories that make these drones and make these ballistic missiles. That is a capability that could take also years to restore. They can restore it. They know how to do it. But that's not insignificant. It's particularly not insignificant because of the war in Ukraine. The Russians are relying heavily on these weapons. Destroying them will matter. And all this in the hope that you destroy their factories, you destroy these missiles and drones, you destroy the nuclear capability. It all only is a ultimate success if there's a change of government. And ultimately, of course, that has to come from within. The people of Iran have to take their country back. And as you know, there are organizations, particularly the MEK, which, as you've noted, has lost at least 40,000 people. There are reports of 100,000 in 1988 alone who have been murdered. 6 I saw executed last week who gathered in the courtyard of the prison and sang patriotic songs moments before their death in an act of defiance. These are tough people. And when I hear the State Department say that there's not anyone to take the government's place, there's no one to rise up, there's no one willing to revolt, it makes me just angry beyond words when these people are dying by the thousands trying to do just that.
The other diversion here, in all honesty, is, I will be attacked by a swarm of bots right after the show for saying this, but returning power to the House of Pahlavi and the Shah's son, moving from a theocracy back to monarchy, is not the answer.
Well, it's not. Not only is it not the answer for the Iranian people, it only leads to more instability because it wouldn't be a legitimate government. The next government has to come from the Iranian people. We're not looking for a government to last 6 months or a year. We need a permanent answer so that no American has to go back to the region and sacrifice again. If you watch Pahlavi's response to the American and Israeli attack, you can actually see how unsuited he is. This is not an easy thing. If you're an Iranian, and even an Iranian in America, you want the regime to fall. You want the IRGC to be destroyed, but it is your country being bombed, and your citizens, even if inadvertently, are getting killed. The way he has been a cheerleader for it, as if he were not an Iranian, with no particular consideration for his own countrymen, just he's politically tone deaf. He has no support in Iran. In fact, there are thousands of people on the street who are yelling no to the Ayatollahs, no to the dictator. They do not want to go back. The idea here is to create a democracy because democracies don't start wars and democracies are stable and just. That's the goal, not another dictator.
Yeah, I mean, look, let's be very clear. While the Shah may have been a reliable ally of the United States, the brutality of his savak kind of matches what the Ayatollahs have done.
Well, and Roger, make no mistake about it, if there had been no Shah, there would be no Ayatollah. The Ayatollah is a reaction to the brutality of the Shah. We can't get ourselves in those circumstances again. This has to be the last generation of Americans that has to lose their lives going to Iran to replace a government. We can't have to do this again.
Well, and I must admit, the astroturfing by supporters of the Shah's son is very impressive, but they actually use the specter of the return of the Shah as a PR tool by the regime, because people know how brutal and how unjust things were under the Shah. And I do agree with President Nixon, who said one of Carter's largest mistakes was the betrayal of the Shah. But and they did have a more cosmopolitan, more reasonable society. Women were allowed to be educated. People were allowed to travel. It was a more cosmopolitan society. But that doesn't mean...
And they supported the United States, which is no small thing. I grant that. But again, it just leads, having a dictatorship like that's that brutal to the Iranian people only leads to these kinds of problems. It's just, we can't fall into that trap again.
When the president says, and he has said, that we're negotiating with some more reasonable elements, if there are any, in Iran, who do you think he's talking about?
It's hard to know, but I don't doubt that it's true. When you take out 3 layers of leadership, even if you have the legal right to rule, in this case, questionable legal because it's by this Guardian's Council, power doesn't settle quickly. So there are undoubtedly rivals, cross-currents. It already was a fractured society. There's the military, there's the IRGC, there's the Ayatollahs themselves, and various professional and political groups. They're probably realizing the regime's time is numbered. Each of them are probably reaching out in some way to speak with the United States in the hope that they're the last man standing. So I don't doubt that that's true. The question is, and it's probably impossible to know without being on the ground, which of them really has any kind of a following any longer. The real goal here, in my opinion, as you started at the outset of the program, is to separate the IRGC from the military and the regime and any ruling class. They are the source of the problem. They keep this government in power by brutality. Without them, there are certainly elements in society that would take over. I know that the MEK in particular, which has had resistance groups on the streets by the thousands, hundreds of these groups, despite the State Department's denial. I've seen the photos of them setting police stations on fire and leading demonstrations. They certainly would fill the vacuum the minute the IRGC was not patrolling the streets with machine guns. And if nothing else works in our bombing campaign, hitting their barracks and their command and control facilities, which I know we did first and are continuing to do, that would be invaluable.
It is, if we can turn here to the Straits of Hormuz, I recognized from the beginning would be an issue. They say that at least 20% of the world's oil flows through that. We had a guest on the show, a military man, who told us that the U.S.'s ability to keep it open was undisputable, but that has not appeared to be as simple as some thought. Are you surprised that our NATO allies, who are so anxious for us to step up in Ukraine, that they refuse to support us in that effort?
I'm surprised, and I'm loath to say it because I have respect for many of those countries. Roger, they have very limited military capabilities. The Germans have very little naval capabilities. The French, Italian, and British have more, the British the most, but they are still quite limited, not only in the ships they have, but their ability to deploy them at length and in depth with resupply and to stay on station. So it would, first of all, it would be politically helpful if they would do so. Second, even a few ships being resupplied by the United States with our capabilities would have military value. But no, it doesn't surprise me. And it's disappointing, but it does not surprise me. And it's obviously going to have a lasting impact on the relationship, which is why they're particularly foolish.
We can pick this up on the other side because we only have about a minute. But I would make an argument that NATO has outlived its usefulness. It had a purpose after World War II when these nations were decimated and we were still relatively strong. But they have failed consistently to pay their fair share. So, of course, their militaries have downgraded because we've been paying to defend them. Yet they don't pay their dues until Donald Trump got them to pony up $658 million that they owed us for their defense. I think they have outlived their usefulness, and the country should the president should consider withdrawing from the NATO alliance. That's my view. That's not the senator's view, but and we can kick that around on the other side. But in some cases, they've even denied us use of their bases. So we're not asking for money. We're not asking for armaments or military. We just want to use our bases in their countries, and they have denied us that right. So I think it should be curtains for NATO. We can beat that up on the other side. You're listening to former Senator Bob Torricelli, a distinguished member of the U.S. Senate Foreign Affairs Committee, a hardline anti-communist in this hemisphere, where he was truly hailed today in the Cuban-American community, still to this day, as a hero. We will be right back. And we're back for our final segment on this Easter Sunday with Senator Bob Torricelli, served with distinction 7 terms in the U.S. House and also in the U.S. Senate from the state of New Jersey, and served on, this is amazing, Finance, Government Affairs, Foreign Relations, Judiciary, and the Rules Committee, but particularly an expert on foreign policy matters, both in this hemisphere and in the Middle East. In all fairness, Senator, I should give you a shot at that question regarding the future of NATO.
Yeah, I think it is essential to the debate right now at American foreign policy, Roger. First, I'm not here to defend Donald Trump. I'll leave that to the Republican Party. But when people say that Trump has damaged NATO, I'm always taken back because, in all fairness, to be fair, there's probably $1 trillion being spent right now by British, French, Italian, German taxpayers, Polish, that was not being spent before, because he wouldn't put up anymore with this United States subsidy. They had to start paying their own way. NATO is now stronger than it's ever been before. Now, to your point, obviously, their reaction in this current conflict is extremely disappointing, and I was even more upset at the reaction about Greenland. You can disagree on the prospects of Greenland. You may disagree on this war, but the fact of the matter is, the United States had a right to raise the issue with Greenland. We can debate it, but threatening the future of NATO because we had a strategic and a military interest in Greenland was highly offensive. And to your point, I loved the French and the German reaction that if you're going to take Greenland, we're going to stop NATO. So your threat is you're going to stop us from defending and subsidizing you if we do something in our interest.
Yeah,
it's almost laughable.
Particularly when the Biden administration, in all fairness, pushed Ukraine into violating the Budapest Memorandum and the Minsk Accords, where we agreed not to push Ukraine into NATO, which I think is Vladimir Putin's biggest problem.
Historians are going to have a field day with that. I mean, no one's going to write in Putin's defense, but obviously the situation pre-invasion was not handled well. And I think Donald Trump is undoubtedly right. Had he been president at the time, there would not have been a war in Ukraine. I think that's fairly indisputable. To your larger point, however, Russia, for whatever it is at the moment, this is a large, powerful country. It will always be powerful, despite its current economic problems. And having that buffer between North America and the great cities of Europe and Russia with a shield by NATO, if it can be made to be an effective shield, still has value. But we got to stop the excessive American subsidy of it. They have to come to rely on themselves, and it has to be dependable not just for their interests, but for ours. If it can be rebalanced and made whole and meaningful, then I think NATO has a role. But it clearly needs a mid-course correction.
Well, of course, after the show, everybody will say that Stone is a Russophile and so on. No, actually, members of my family were mowed down by Russian tanks in Budapest in 1956 because I'm actually half Italian and half Hungarian. I'm Italian from the waist down. But this war has to come to an end. It is a meat grinder. The Russians will not be defeated, in my opinion. And it just goes on and on and on. With just 1 minute left, 1.5 minutes, give us your quick take on Venezuela.
Well, first, as you know, in Venezuela and now again in Iran, the capabilities of the American military just continue to amaze. They just have no peer. Their performance is extraordinary. The lasting impact of Venezuela we're only starting to feel. Reshuffling economic power, the power of oil, the message it has sent to American adversaries. We can debate the law. People can say whether it was a good idea or a bad idea politically. But the reality is, beyond political debate, is it has reshuffled power to the American advantage.
All right, we have to leave it there. I want to thank our guest, Senator Bob Torricelli, our all-time most popular guest in the Stone Show here, for joining us on this beautiful Easter Sunday. Indeed, he is risen. It is Resurrection Sunday. God bless you for joining us. Senator, thanks for tuning in today.
This is Greg Kelly. Donate now to Toys for Tots, which works year-round. Go to toysfortots.org. Toys for Tots supports children in need throughout the year with programs like the Toys for Tots Literacy Program. Established in 2008, it has provided over 63 million books to disadvantaged children. The Toys for Tots Literacy Program is committed to providing disadvantaged children with direct access to books and educational resources that enhance their ability to read and communicate effectively. Go to toysfortots.org.